Edition of Simply Stated. I'm going to go ahead and turn my car off so I can actually talk to you today. This episode, I feel like I don't know how other people are dealing with the news about the fires in Los Angeles. I had a friend who actually escaped from the situation with his wife, who I also knew for a number of years out in the DC area, and they were friends of mine. And so for me, it was a lot more upsetting than it should have been. And I'm really to the point of not being able to watch a lot of the footage anymore. Like, I'm into the phase of wanting to watch talk shows or even, people who want to be comical about it because I can't take the stress of it. And a lot of that is based on my personal experiences and what I know about the situation, and just the frustration of it, but if you're looking for reasons for why it happened or what is going on, I mean, that's all pretty much covered in the Thought Project, just so you know. And, I've detailed more than enough about Endeavor Corporation as a Russian KGB organization and their history of setting fires to make money for their Hollywood clients, or for their Hollywood clients to actually, create an insurance filing or something so they can then pay for their event to go forward. And was a victim of one of their fires when I was a kid. My face and my hands were actually burned. So I ended up in a Pittsburgh hospital as a little child and had to have severe burn treatment. And you can still see some of those marks today on me if you would see me in person or up close. But anyway, so moving on, this episode is going to be focusing on much lighter topics to a certain extent. I'm going to talk about Kim Kardashian's Santa Baby video at Christmas time that came out this year and the history of where that film came from, because it's a short film. A lot of people didn't really understand it, but other people enjoyed it. I posted on my Facebook page and called it a little bit desperate. I enjoyed it. The story behind the Santa Baby film, because I put together material for it like over 10 years ago, is that back when I was growing up in Dubuque, the cult group that founded Endeavor, that was Russian KGB, it's called the FSB of Russia today, is the actual, like, if you need to look up an organization in Russia to understand what it is you're dealing with or that I'm talking about, that's what it is. That's its name today. And they were putting a number of people, myself included, through these bizarre cult events where they would end up at parties, especially at Christmas time, and then be drugged up and then end up being forced to crawl out of the event. And were oftentimes told events that there was going to happen to them. And of course, as far as the police being accountable in Dubuque in the 80s, there was no accountability. And so I went through it once at like the age of 9, where I literally had to crawl out of this weird, tacky, like, white trash home and literally saw the exact stuff that's depicted in that video. So it's not a video that like came out of nowhere. It was put together based on experiences people have had having to actually, being actually picked up, abused in the 80s and 90s, stuck at weird house parties, drugged up, and then being forced to crawl out on their hands and knees if they wanted to live. And of course, at the end, every time there would be a woman dressed up as a nun. In Dubuque, they actually were nuns that they had picked up and raped from the local Catholic organizations. They had taken some nuns from their homes and actually beat them up and raped them and then drugged them and then forced them to lay there, and say exactly what you see in the end of the video. So if you're looking at it and you think, well, Kim Kardashian, gosh, she's so desperate. That's what I'm going to put up on my Facebook page until I'm ready to make this episode. And frankly, if anyone asks you about it, you can say, well, you say what I said. This seems kind of desperate, but it's obviously an enjoyable show that she put on there. So, unfortunately, it's based on a cult ritual that the KGB was putting people through back in the 80s and 90s, and always women. And women of different ages. I was a little girl at the time when it happened to me, but there were other women that it happened to who were older. And it was basically just a tactic of psychological abuse. That you just have to get through it all. And if you're me, you're going to get through it and be like, well, man, just remember to crawl out of there, and laugh about it. But, there's no really good explanation, or there's nothing, like, what are you even supposed to say at an event like that? Except that you survived it, So the important thing is to think about it from that terminology. Of course, I don't remember Macaulay Culkin actually ever being at any of those events. I do remember them having a really weird Santa at all of them that you would have to deal with at some point. And what I want to say about that is there was a history of dirty Santas back in Dubuque. And then by the time it was to Janesville, they wouldn't allow any of the Santas to act out. And of course, today, if you notice, there's a policy of doing background checks and, a lot of behavioral observance of people who present as Santas and for kids to pose with or whatever, even in your local mall or, local, whatever you want to call that, Christmas pictures with Santa event. Those are all being become heavily monitored today as a result of those weird cult events. So that's where some of this comes from. You think everyone's just trying to ruin times with Santa. Well, no, I mean, when you have a weird company that's been formed that's based off of Russian FSB law of Russia and they're into abusing people, everything has to become more heavily monitored if any of it's ever going to go forward. We could all just quit doing pictures with Santa events, and a lot of people have. But so the people want to continue forward with it, it's become much more heavily monitored. So, it isn't just some weird movie that Kim Kardashian made so she could, put out pictures of her butt. I mean, yeah, that's part of her persona, right? But it's a persona. It's actually a recreation of something that a lot of people have lived through. And as far as getting justice for it, I mean, just forget it. And also, I'm going to move on to another topic today. So this will be a little more interesting episode. Is remember how in the previous episodes of the Thought Project, just so you know, and then vaguely touched this and simply stated, the fact that, I went through a bunch of investigations in the DC area, and there was this overwhelming feeling among investigators that actual strippers, not booty girls, because I was a booty TNA dancer in my day, and, not models, but actual strippers that would go naked in public, were not good people and were oftentimes categorized as being borderlines or psychopaths, and oftentimes not very honest about their work. And I've been trying to put together that for myself just independently for a while. I finally got an opportunity to interview some, although I don't think they realized what I was doing, but it's been while I've been up in Michigan. And I can now say firsthand, based on what I saw down the Washington, D.C. area and up here, that at least female strippers definitely appear to be borderlines and very much part of the Chinese CCP and Russian FSB, to the point that there's been issues with, people going as staff to work in some of the gentlemen's clubs. They're supposed to be gentlemen's clubs. And the actual strippers demanding that some of the women or men who work in them perform in their place and then taking their income. So no different than J-Lo stealing my voice or image or some of these other women doing the same thing that are supposed to be in the industry, the entertainment industry, want to collect somebody else's paycheck. And then, but worse, in the strip clubs, there's been an issue with people being murdered, snuff films being made, and the use of signet systems to try to control them in them. So this is, if you're sort of wondering about the decline of the modern day strip club or gentleman's club, at least the regular ones that aren't heavily secured or controlled, because I think Deja Vu runs some of the ones that have had problems. I did finally look into that after all these years, because there was a Deja Vu club in Janesville, and Cersei performed at it. And she was responsible for murdering some women at it who were not actually strippers. They were just employees. So there's been this long history of, women and men being killed in them. And so I think it's just really important to know, if you're wondering, who sits around and pontificates on or wonders about the decline of full-on strip clubs or common strip clubs, that's what it is. And they actually, the government went and closed a number of them up in western Pennsylvania near where Cersei lived, because she'd been working at them, but then she was also, of course, stealing from people, even raping and abusing patrons and murdering them in some cases. So, and then to go back to the story, I know some of you realize that, so I'm officially a Playboy bunny again, and I did pose as a Playboy bunny years and years ago, 20 years ago. And I had some conversations with Hugh Hefner that were very short. I told him what I was going through, and, he had all the constant world that I was going to get through it, but also that I would be able to solve everything. And, I don't think that's really true that I could do that. He reminded me a little too much of my dad that way. But there was that overconfidence that worried me. But he was desperate to figure out why there had been so many murders in his Playboy bunny clubs and that he had to close them, because those were actual gentlemen's clubs with just, the women in the bunny costume, which is more like a go-go dancer type thing. And, not the full-on strippers. And he even told me, so I said, oh, no strippers. So there's definitely, just as a basic notice, you don't have to go into all of the military stuff and politics and geopolitics. And, it's really beyond geopolitics. It's really just war when you're starting to talk about the Chinese CCP and the Russian FSB, KGB. But to simply say, there's just this line there between the go-go dancer, the TNA model, and then there's strippers that are naked. No. Because normal, sane women don't strip down to nothing in public. The woman that went by the name, I nicknamed her Karen and then stopped using it. Her actual names in the U.S. was either Kendall or Fatina. She had no problem going naked in public. And she also had no problem running around naked with a knife and trying to kill people. And she performs as a Hollywood, so-called performer today. Her music is terrible. And, extremely abusive to my mother and to other people. And just, the fire that happened with her parents' house back up in Pennsylvania back in 2020 was clearly to fund her tour. I took the insurance money and fund her tour with it. So that's what I'm trying to connect for you there, because, you know, if you've ever wondered what the issue was with the full-on strippers as opposed to dancers and exotic dancers, that's what it is. You can personally just stop at the line of saying, you know, they're borderlines, and you don't have to go into all the other stuff that I would know because of my life experience and time doing investigations and professional experience. You know, you can just stop there. And I need to address something else that's really been in my mind for a long time that I talked about, which is that I knew Quincy Jones in the course of my life. And he was friends with my actual father, and he was also friends with Weston Noble of Luther College. And I want to remind you that those three men, their biggest downfall in sin was pride. They were very prideful about their abilities to do these setups. And they were very good at it. And if you want to know what I mean, you look at like Milli Vanilli, where the one guy couldn't sing and he had ties to the FSB, and that's not really shown in the media. They just talk about how he lied about his voice. But they were really good at those. And it was a dangerous game and a very foolish one. And it eventually came to an end. You know, by the time I got to Luther College, the Russian military organizations, the FSB, you know, used to call themselves the KGB, had organized to put a stop to the setups. Like, I was literally trying to stop myself, and, you know, like JLo and some of those people just gonna be like, no, we're just gonna steal. You know, they just thought they were gonna steal from everybody, and they did, and they have. You know, they're still alive today, and now we have the fires in Los Angeles, and, you know, public officials having to come out and make announcements that there will simply be no looting and stealing, and, you know, taking people's kids and cars and land and children lost or hopefully not lost, and, you know, dogs, cats, you know, personal possessions gone. You know, they're going to do their best to try and stop that. I think the most that the U.S. government will be able to do is repeat the actions in Lahaina, which is to say you're just simply not going to assume control of this land. You know, that the Hollywood celebrities and people tied with Endeavor there are just simply not going to be allowed to assume control of the land. That's really it. So going back to my dad and Quincy Jones and Weston Noble, you know, all three of them, Weston was the only one who admitted that they were fools. Because he saw by the time I got to Luther College that they were going to be caught up with and that it was over. That there was a loss there. It was happening. And that they had lost this game. And I oftentimes look back and think that maybe all three of them suffered from some kind of dementia or even, you know, head injuries or something had happened to them themselves to even think that they could get away with those kinds of setups. Not with people like that. Not with people that mean and aggressive and violent, you know? You wouldn't want to play games with those people at all. You want to figure out how to get away from them. And so, you know, my father always said, you know, you're going to come through all this, you're going to, you know, you're going to find your way, and you're going to figure out how to make a living after all of it. And you're going to figure out the truth, and that's what I came to as the truth. I just thought they were fools to ever play games with them in the first place. By the way, Quincy Jones did work with me on my voice and was one of my voice teachers, but if you were to say, you know, Quincy Jones was my only voice teacher, you would be totally discrediting all of the other people who'd worked with me over the years. And because I worked with opera singers, I worked with, you know, folk singers, I was trained by a lot of really talented professionals. Judith Mulberg of Dubuque, Iowa, she's a folk singer, trained me, and did it for free and for fun because she liked me. And she was upset about the abuse I was going through at the time. Like, you know, there's a lot of people out there that have contributed who are fairly significant and matter. You know, Quincy, what he said to me was kind of hurtful because he was very much the opinions of my father. He said, you're a beautiful woman, you're very attractive, and you can sing. And he said, we can use that, but we can't really do much with you as long as you're around, you know, Sarah and Wilhelm. And the big thing for you is going to be getting away from them. And in the end, a lot of people said, this guy just didn't understand what needed to be done. And neither did my dad. And frankly, neither did Weston Noble, really. And so that's all it was. They were just these three guys that had musical ability that didn't really understand. And Weston Noble even said, he said he was a musician and artist. He didn't understand how to combat the issue. And so what I got out of it was that in order to survive, I couldn't just be an artist. You know, I had to evolve as a person. And so I went down the D.C. and I got other degrees, and I moved on from living an artist's lifestyle. And their mentality, I had to come up with a completely different method of interacting with the world. So, you know, it's hard. Anyway, so this has been another edition of Simply Stated, and I hope you all enjoy it. And, you know, the death of Quincy Jones, even during the time that I was stuck in that house, that like back in 2023. I was going through some really nasty stuff before DHS got me out up here in Michigan, actually. Thank Michigan DHS for their work today. And his death while I was there was really, I mean, like Tina Turner died, Quincy Jones died, I didn't know Tina Turner, but I loved her music. And it's really, it's never a coincidence, and it's really hard to deal with sometimes. But, that's life, right? Life in the modern era. And you just have to, like, know it. There's no ceremony or event that's ever going to fix all of it, but certainly some ceremonies, events do help. And then after that, it's only the work you do on yourself. Every day. And this now really is the end of this episode of Simply Stated. Thank you.